Hello and welcome to Student Affairs Live. I'm your host, Tony Doody, and I'm pleased to be joining you from my professional home at Rutgers University. We broadcast on the Higher Ed Live network, and you can tune in to Student Affairs Live along with my brilliant friend and co-host, Heather Shea Gasser, Wednesdays at 1 o'clock Eastern Time. If you're unfamiliar with past episodes, I highly recommend you check out and favorite the archive link that we are tweeting out now. We're proud to have covered over 100 important topics with over 200 of the very top practitioners, scholars, leaders, and experts in the field. In a moment, I'll introduce you to our guests, but we can't do that without first giving a shout out to the sponsors that make Student Alive possible. Higher Ed Live is produced by M. Stoner, a marketing communication firm that works with education institutions on branding, strategy, web design, and more. M. Stoner is offering a free webinar on analytics for digital storytelling on September 28th. Analytics provide us with vital information to track and measure audience behavior so we can extend the reach and impact of our storytelling efforts across all our communication channels. What do you measure and how do you use that data to refine your story? Join M. Stoner for this webinar to get your analytics game on. Registration is free, and we're tweeting out that link shortly where you can sign up. ACPA, College Student Educators International, is pleased to provide support for Student Affairs Live, one of the many ways you can be innovative with your own professional development. Visit myacpa.org to discover the next way to engage with your own personal and professional development. ACPA provides a special institute just for mid-level managers, which one of our guests will talk about later on. Registration is now open for the January program. Visit, again, myacpa.org and register today. Now, I want to take a moment to thank Kate Zulo and Robin Janice, who are in the studio with me today, monitoring the back channel and forwarding me your best content and questions from the Twitterverse. Now, finally, I'm very honored to have join me today Dr. Maureen Wilson, Dr. Mamta Accapadi, and Dr. Nicky Damania. I'd like to start us all off by having you each briefly share your current school, your role, and why this topic is so near and dear to you. So let's start on my left, on my screen, with Nicky.
Thank you, Tony. My name is Nicky Damania. I'm the Director of Student Life at Bakersfield College in California. My role here is to work with our student government, activities, organizations, our pantry program. I chair our Students of Concerns team, as well as do all things related with student conduct. Mid-levels is quite dear to my heart. Not only am I the chair for the ACPA's Mid-Level Community of Practice, I also was one of the members who helped develop this program within ACPA. Being in its third year at ACPA, it has grown massively with the amount of professional development opportunities that we do provide our members and the discussions that we have within our own practice of community. This is a great area to be in because quite a bit of our field, and according to the last survey that ACPA did, about 42%, don't completely quote me on that, was mid-level. And so that is a huge area within our field that we address within mid-level community of practice.
Excellent. Mamta?
Hi, my name is Mamta Accapadi, and I serve as the Vice President for Student Affairs at Rollins College. I was very excited to participate in this conversation, and here's why. I think, you know, when you think about mid-level professionals, in our field, this is where the rubber hits the road. This is where the mission of all of our institutions, not just student affairs, but the mission alignment and deployment of our institutional missions comes alive. It comes alive because of our colleagues that are in this particular category of professionals. So I think of mid-level professionals as the bedrock of our culture, and I think how we care for and support, elevate, and uplift our colleagues in this space is critical to our work, and so I'm grateful to be here.
Also grateful to have you here. Maureen, you're up.
Thanks for inviting me, Tony. I'm Maureen Wilson, and I'm Professor and Chair of the Department of Higher Education and Student Affairs at Bowling Green State University. I'm really interested in our profession and professional socialization and professional identity, and I think all those topics intersect here. I think a lot of mid-level professionals feel pressure to move up, even if that's not necessarily what they want to do. They're content in their current positions. So absolutely we should support people who do aspire to a senior student affairs role, but not everybody does. And I think you can have a very rich and fulfilling career at the mid-level, and I think really examining ways to do that benefits our profession.
Right. Now, I've had a lot of discussion and debate on what constitutes a mid-level professional, and certainly everyone has their opinions, and I think we tweeted out a question to our audience to see how they would define it, but I want to get a more scholarly perspective on this. So Maureen, I'm going to ask you how the literature distinguishes mid-level from new and senior level professionals.
So the literature seems pretty consistent in defining new professionals as 0 to 5 years postmasters. Senior level is more typically defined by title, so either being the senior student affairs officer, such as the vice president for student affairs, or a senior student affairs officer, such as an associate vice president for student affairs, but one who has oversight over several different functional areas and so forth. So mid-levels are in between there, right? But it covers such a broad territory, from, you know, still relatively fresh, you know, so anywhere from 6 to 30 or more years can capture mid-level. But I would certainly say that the issues that people face across the career span are going to vary a good bit.
Cool. Now, Nicky, this question for you. You're in a mid-level role right now, and a key challenge for mid-level professionals is often how to transition from being a specialist to leading a cross-functional team. So I'm looking for some advice, some strategies on how folks can best make this transition.
Yeah, that's always a good question to have, especially as individuals want to progress in their career path within the field of student affairs and higher education. One of the things that we're looking at within mid-level is how do we get more mid-levels to communicate with each other for more shared opportunities to do activities as far as academic research or some type of shared governance structured. So when we're looking at our institution as a whole, where are those gaps within the institution that talents could be used in, whether it's in the curriculum base and sitting on a curriculum committee, whether it's in the safety committee, whether it's in athletics committee, branching out those opportunities so that the individual gets more tools under their belt and exposures to different areas within the campus environment. Getting involved with different professional organizations, either within your specific area or within ACPA as a whole, and seeking out those leadership positions, whether they're as a directorate member or a volunteer at ACPA convention. And then as mid-levels, I'd say don't be afraid to take on tasks from other areas and help out other areas, but making sure that we also delegate other responsibilities out to our individuals that we either supervise or mentor at our fields. That will give us a little bit more of an opportunity to breathe and be able to take on other responsibilities, to build that resume and to be able to get those mentors and friends who can serve as references when we do our next job search.
Nice. So, as a follow-up to that, as new professionals transition to the mid-level role, what are some skills and competencies that you all see, and anyone can answer this, that you feel are really essential, and Nicky, you've mentioned some of these, in order to develop and best perform mid-level responsibilities?
One that I think is really key is supervision, because it's another thing that tends to distinguish or define mid-levels, is that they're typically supervising other professional staff. And so the ability to do that and to do that very well, I think, does a lot to position people to be able to be successful and also to move up if they desire that.
I would have to add
Oh, go ahead.
I would have to add on to that is not only just supervising, but being in that mentorship role, as well as leading either 360 evaluations and being able to help your staff members excel in their position and giving them those professional development opportunities that get them into their next position as well. and we mid-levels tend to play that mentoring role very well. And in order to do that is kind of giving that evaluation, as well as delegating out roles and responsibilities within the areas. Another aspect I would take to that is when we are delegated projects, is to really give that large-scale approach and finishing off the project management component from the gathering, from the implementation, to all the way down to analyzing the data once the event has occurred, and being able to show your supervisor that you can take an idea through its fruition all the way out to the ending of review and presenting data back out to the institution.
Yeah, I would add that, you know, the mid-level professional is truly the nexus of the both and. And so when I was kind of reflecting on some things, I would say negotiating the tension between managing things and projects and leveraging energy, and kind of discerning what is needed at what point in time, and so being able to negotiate what kind of leadership is needed in what capacity, because sometimes depending on the work there might be a level of granularity that's expected, and then there are other times where vision is expected, and so being able to toggle back and forth and recognize what operating skill is needed at the moment.
Great. Maureen, you recently published in the Journal of College Student Development an article titled Professional Identity, Career Commitment, and Career Entrenchment of Mid-Level Student Affairs Professionals. And you wrote about the relatively high turnover rate in student affairs as compared to other areas of higher education. So what factors did your study reveal that affect longevity, in particular for mid-level professionals?
Okay. First, I want to acknowledge my co-authors, Deb Liddell, Amy Hershey, and Kira Pesquezi. This is truly a team effort, so I want to share that credit. But from our review of the literature, a few different factors stood out. Perhaps not surprisingly, high satisfaction and high morale both correlated with longevity in the field, but there's a lot that we don't know. In our study in particular, career contentment seems to serve as a proxy for intent to remain in the profession. So fostering contentment may foster longevity, and I'll elaborate on contentment in a bit. But then there's also the notion that some turnover in an organization is desirable, right? You want to bring in some new energy, some new ideas, some new perspectives, but you also want good opportunities for internal promotion, that people can see a path forward without necessarily having to pack up and move. So I would say also that a professional might be committed to the profession long term, but not necessarily to the institution.
Now, one of our viewers, Monica Faulkman, she wanted to clarify that it's not that we don't want to move up, but it's that there are no jobs available. So she wanted to know if anyone has any thoughts about that sentiment, and perhaps that's one of the factors, right, that folks are moving out.
Well, I think that's absolutely a part of it. You know, I may want to move up, but there are a lot more entry-level positions, and the funnel narrows as you go up, of course. And so I've got some thoughts that we can do now or talk about later about opportunities that supervisors might be able to create for people who are looking to move up, but there's not necessarily a path right there. So, you know, maybe lateral transfers, it might be additional responsibilities. So there are some other opportunities for that.
There was a study back in 2006 by Jesse Grant that suggested that mid-level managers in particular struggle with work-life balance. So in our field, many people suggest that if you don't eat, breathe, and live your work, that you're not a true professional, right? And Mamta, I know you've got an opinion on this topic. What can we do to improve the quality of life for middle managers, and what are some strategies that we can use to create and employ a healthy work-life balance?
I have opinions. I'm going to apologize. No, I'm not going to apologize for them, actually. First, for those of my colleagues that know me, you've heard me say this before, and for those that don't, here you go. So I don't believe in work-life balance. I think it's a patriarchal construct, and that's probably another conversation for another gathering. And I know that the alternative phrase is work-life integration, and I can kind of join that a little bit. And I mean, I'm just going to honestly and vulnerably say that I think it's our job to elevate joy and wholeness. And joy and wholeness looks and feels different for different people. But to get to the heart, I think, of the question that you're asking about, in our field, there is this assumption that we have to live, breathe, eat, sleep our work, and somehow that is, like, we have to be our professional association famous, and we have to, there's certain things that you do to advance in our field. I think we are contributing to that culture, right? And so for me, before I offer advice to other people, I think about what is the culture that I'm creating at my institution or contributing to. So I'm going to give what might feel like basic reflections, but I was and still manage kind of unhealthy habits in my own work, so I'm not also offering advice that I don't need to work on myself. But first, I think we need to create a culture where we're valuing wholeness. And so if the people that are eating, breathing, sleeping, and engaging in kind of, if imbalance is the concept, then those folks are the folks being recognized or given rewards or given promotions, then we are perpetuating that culture. And so I would just offer reflection around what does our performance infrastructure look like around people who are choosing to elevate healthy, grounded, whole behaviors. And this is the work we do across all of the functional areas of our field, so we should be in alignment with that as it feels appropriate, and knowing that that looks and feels different for each one of us as individuals. So performance, and for me, that's what I do. I mean, that's a conversation I have with all of my colleagues. It's how are you modeling wholeness? Because our students are watching us as well. So there's many reasons for us to do that. The second piece that I feel is it was referenced earlier, this idea of this assumption that you have to move up and on in our field. I just thought that was a really, really rich reference. And I want to add to that a little bit. I think I've seen it in our, at least in our professional, all of our different professional association spaces, this idea that advancement is the goal, and if you're not advancing, somehow you're mediocre, right? That's the kind of implied. And we need to do our best to interrupt that conversation and narrative. And satisfaction and complacence are not the same thing. So if I'm satisfied in my current role, and I have created an environment where I'm learning and contributing, and I am advancing the mission, again, of the institution, that's what we all want. And so as long as wholeness and richness and advancing the institutional mission are part of that practice, I think we should focus on that. And of course, as professionals, we have to situate agency of one's life and story with that person. So I'm not going to overlay on a colleague who is a really phenomenal director of student conduct and say, well, I think it's time for you to move on. If I have performance concerns, I should talk about performance concerns. And if that person has promise and they've thought about it, then we should have that conversation. But if we need solid functional area experts, I mean, there's a gift and institutional memory in that work too. So I think we need to value the gifts and talents of people across all layers of how we serve students.
I've also heard people articulate really well, this is my job, it's not my life.
Yes.
And so they do a really good job at work, but they have hobbies and families and a lot of things outside of work that keep them happy and fulfilled. So their primary focus may not be on career or career advancement.
But there is that opportunity for a person to stay within the field at a mid-level, and as Mamta was saying, doing those transfers, those lateral moves that really build individuals' toolbox. I don't think I've met very many mid-levels that have been in the field for more than 15, 20 years that don't say that they get up in the morning and say they really love what they do.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what really motivates mid-levels to continue to be in the field and be at a level where they're content. They're mastering a skill set or a talent that is, as Maureen was saying, the institutional memory of that conference or of the institution that is valuable to the progression of the institution as a whole.
So I want to follow up, Mamta. Marcy Walton from Cincinnati, Ohio, asks or states that are the people who are constantly doing more, and I'm guessing you'll argue about this definition of doing more, and not modeling wellness, aren't they the ones who get the promotions?
Well, and again, yeah, it depends on how you define more. So, I think every institution has its own culture. So, the first context is important. And so I can speak to my institution or institutions where I have worked, and I've been really fortunate for the institutions where I've worked. When I was a mid-level professional, kind of as defined by our conversation today, I worked more and a lot, and my behaviors and habits were really, really unhealthy. And that caused harm to me and to other people. So I always think about that. And there are people that work and do more and don't do that, right? And so I think it's about, that's why I lean to negotiating wholeness rather than, like, who am I to define what's more or less for somebody else. What I will say, though, is I think intention and purpose matters. So I'm doing more to get promoted only. And so then the quality embedded in the more is not effective. So it's a superficial doing more because that's my checklist. This is the checklist I need to get to the next level, so I'm just following the checklist. And on the flip side, I will say, I'm someone who I've purposefully thought about my career. So yes, I've had a checklist, but my checklist is what is the learning that I need to do fully and thoughtfully to be able to have the skills to be at the next level, not to get to the next level. So what are my learning outcomes for myself? What's my syllabus of learning in my current role? And I think sometimes in the challenge of people who get promotions, I think sometimes we may not explore the depth of the more. We just look at the absolute value of the more. And so I think sitting in the depth and being thoughtful around actual contribution might help in that conversation.
So I'm going to jump around here a little bit. I'm going to stick on this topic of advancement. Robin Janice from Rutgers, here at Rutgers University, is curious to hear whether you all feel that a doctorate is necessary these days for advancement, particularly from mid-level to a senior level position, and what do you think about what we think is a trend of folks that are looking to get their doctorate at a much younger age and don't necessarily have practical experience before they jump into that role?
So it depends, of course, is the answer, right? I do have concerns, and we talk about this a lot on our higher ed admissions committee, that, and partly I feel like at some point or another you've got to pay your dues. And so you can pay those early, because with a doctorate, I think, comes expectations for certain salaries and position level and things like that. But if you go into a job search with a doctorate and not the experience to match it, versus a person with extensive experience but not the degree, that experience for a lot of positions, maybe less so with the senior student affairs position, might win out. Or you get a doctorate early in your career, and you might wind up at an institution that's not on your dream list, right? Because you're going to pay your dues with doctorate in hand. And I think it's so wildly variable from person to person and institution to institution and position to position.
I would agree with that very much, that it's really much of a self-motivating thing to start off, because a doctorate is a commitment. It's a time away from your your family, your hobbies, to make sure that you're invested in your doctorate and able to give back in that way. So it is also part of education. I do feel in order to move up in the career, a terminal degree is needed to help in that, but the experience does need to match what the terminal degree is showing. But when we're working in a college environment and our students are there, it's much more beneficial to a student when they see a doctor talking with them, with a person with a doctorate in there. So then they're motivated to move on. I work now at a community college, and I did not see the impact of what a doctorate would do until I worked here, when I'm working with low-income first-generational students whose only dreams at the time was to get an AA. Now working with them and saying, AA is only the first step. You need to go and get your baccalaureate, to get your master's, to get your doctorate. Then that starts opening up, and then we're able to relate back. So it's not just only a personal thing, it's also to be that role model to our students.
So Maureen, you talked in your journal article about the relationship between professional identity and career commitment. What are some of the forces that compromise professional identity?
So we would define professional identity as a commitment to the values and practices of the profession, plus an investment of personal resources such as time and money and effort, that really comes from an internalized congruence between someone's personal and professional values. So all those things come together to form a professional identity. In our study, as we dug into professional identity, we identified 3 dimensions of it. So one is career contentment. So I'm satisfied with my career progression, and I have an intent to stay in the field. Community connection, that indicates a strong commitment to one's current institution or their geographic area. A locus of connection that's more local than cosmopolitan. There's a whole line of research on locals and cosmopolitans that I think is very interesting. And then the last aspect of community connection is, again, an intent to remain in the area. Then the third dimension is values congruence with the profession. So my personal values are a good match with the espoused values of the field. I'm intellectually curious about the profession. I'm committed to staying current on issues and advancing skills. So those are the 3 components of professional identity. Career commitment refers to this motivation to work in student affairs or another profession, of course. And we examine 3 dimensions of career commitment. So career identity, and that's the importance of one's work to their sense of self and their emotional connection to it. Career planning, which is being thoughtful about advancing one's career, having purposeful goals, having strategies for achieving those goals, all those types of things. And then the third component of career commitment is career resilience. And that really speaks to the flexibility and the hardiness that one has in the face of career challenges or setbacks. All 3 of those aspects of career commitment were highly correlated to values congruence and career contentment dimensions of professional identity. So those things really gelled and melded well.
Great. Now, Mamta, people talk a lot about people leading from the middle, and you and I had a conversation about this a few weeks ago, where you suggested that we are all indeed leading from the middle, or should be, regardless of title or years of experience. Can you explain that thought to our viewers and give us some concrete strategies on how we can do that, how we can manage from the middle?
Yeah, thank you. So, I think about my role as in the role of VP of Student Affairs at Rollins College. I report to the president of the institution. The president answers to the Board of Trustees. The Board of Trustees, in many ways, answer to the alumni, and all of the other partners, the students. I mean, they have that care of the institution. So when you look at kind of that ecosystem, all of a sudden it's not, there's the senior cabinet level student affairs officer. It's here's someone who's in the middle of a steward of an institution's mission, right? And so we are all at varying levels or degrees in the middle, and so. And that's not, I also want to own the privilege and power that comes with being the cabinet level student affairs officer, so I'm not suggesting that there is not privilege and power conversation here as well. What I'm suggesting is that we can learn from each other about how we negotiate being in the middle of answering to and mentoring folks. And so when I think about leading from the middle, actually Larry Roper has written, and he was my former supervisor, so I learned a lot from him at Oregon State, but there's I think it's in 2009 in the Journal of College and Character, where he's written a piece called Leading from the Middle. So I would offer that as a reference. But essentially, and I offer this because this is going to be my lifelong work. So I'm not suggesting solutions. I'm suggesting that this is work that I also navigate in myself, which is the work of centrality. And so I just want to take ownership of the fact that I came from multicultural affairs and particularly race-based work earlier in my career. And so I felt very strongly that I needed to take certain positions on issues and then lead from those positions. Now I think it's perfectly appropriate to take positions on issues that as human beings we have that right and we should be doing that. However, I think about what it would mean to lead from a central place. That is something that I think about, because if we are in the work of the wholeness of all students, we need to lead from a place where we can be in relationship with all parties and people that are going to support all students. And that doesn't mean we take away our values, but it means how do we lead from a space where as many people can live and learn in our communities with their dignities intact, right? If that's the commitment I made to going into this work. So I'm saying this as somebody who really was not a good example of this as an early career professional, and so, from the many mistakes that I continue to make. So, but as we're thinking about, so if I was thinking about leading from the middle, I just imagine a ladder. And so I think about, at the bottom of a ladder, you have this amazing perspective that you can see. As you climb up the ladder, you can see different things, right? Maybe you can see different parts. There's a different perspective. And of course, at any position of the ladder, there are perspectives that you have that are meaningful and important. And so how you inform people that might be at a different position of the ladder or a different, it's really important. That perspective and wisdom that comes from that position is really important. So how do you first honor the perspective that you bring? Not defend it, because for me, I used to defend my perspective versus honoring it and saying, wow, this is the wisdom that I can bring from this place, and I would like to contribute that to this team. So honoring perspective. The second thing that I would say, and again, lots of personal work here, I think about the continuum of relationship, being in relationship, and being right. And so I think sometimes when we are, and many mid-level professionals are our functional area superstars. And so sometimes, at least for me, when I used to feel disempowered, it was really important for me to show and prove that I was right. So I would quote everything you needed me to quote, and have all of the references in proper APA format to be right. And it was important for me to be right because I thought that was my way of moving things forward and contributing to the community. But sometimes in being right, I might sacrifice relationships. And so what I think about in leading from the middle is, what is my core value? And I'm not suggesting let's be wrong all the time, but what I'm offering is, what would it mean to elevate the relationship more than being right? Because if I am right but am not in a relationship with anybody, will students benefit? Will the institution benefit? Will our mission advance? And so I think about that a lot. And so what I've found more and more as I continue in our profession is I find less and less the need to be right in a conversation. I can always revisit a conversation because my relationships with people matter. And again, it's taken me a long time to get to that place. The third piece that I would say is that as I engage in work, and again, I would say this across the board, I think about this as I sit at the cabinet. When I sit at the cabinet as a cabinet level student affairs officer, I can't speak from the student affairs perspective only. My work is to center the mission of the institution. And so in our work, instead of having us and our work be the center, what does it look like for the students' experience, the students' learning to be the center of the conversation? So decentering the conversation is a tool that I would offer. And then finally, we're in the work of human beings. And so for me, with any of these conversations, a social justice frame, owning the privileged identities we bring to the table, owning how our subordinated identities and how those identities intersect and inform our own perspective. So if I'm impacted because of sexism that I've experienced and I'm leading from that place, sexism is not a good thing. However, my leading from a place impacted by sexism rather than doing my own healing work is also probably not going to create an environment of health for other people. So thinking about the social justice conversations, again, we're human beings, so elevating humanity is a core part of our work, and how we do that and how we own the identities that we bring is critical. So those are the 4 things that I would offer.
Now, Maureen, we've talked about the concept of folks choosing to stay in a mid-level position, and I want you to kind of expand on this concept of career entrenchment and share the difference as you've defined it between entrapped and contented workers.
Yeah. So this was we really enjoyed working with this notion in our study recently. So with career entrenchment, there's an immobility that emerges from economic and psychological investments that make it difficult to change careers. I've put too much into this to walk away from this career. So I feel, I've committed time, money, effort, and the losses I might incur, social status, social capital, friendships, relationships, all of those things might work to keep me in this career, and maybe I don't see good alternatives out there either. So that's what entrenchment might look like. I think I'm entrenched. I've dedicated my whole life to this profession, and honestly, I don't know what I would do if somebody came and yanked me out of the chair and said, you can't do this anymore. But there are 2 types of entrenchment. So one is that you're entrenched and entrapped. So maybe my partner has a good job that we're committed to, my kids are in good schools, I'm caring for elderly parents nearby, I'm part of a close-knit community. So moving isn't a good option for me or maybe for us, but I'm not happy with my career and I don't see good alternatives. So that's entrapped. But workers can be entrenched and contented. So I'm not mobile, but I also don't want to leave this place. I'm satisfied with my career. I'm happy how things are going. So entrenchment can look pretty different for different people.
Cool. Nicky, this next one for you. You talked about this earlier. Mid-level professionals in particular are often find themselves in this unique position. They're trying to attend to their own professional growth and career development or advancement, but they also have a supervisory responsibility to nurture the performance and the success of those underneath them. So how can we be more intentional about mapping out this professional engagement, both for ourselves and for those that we supervise?
Yeah, I definitely like the title of this webinar, The Unsung Heroes. It really shows that the mid-levels are those kind of backbone kind of individuals. And one of the things I could say is like developing a formal professional development plan where They sit with their supervisor and figure out what is needed, where things are going. Those are the opportunities where they can ask for additional duties and maybe delegate some duties out. This also gives them an opportunity to talk to their supervisees or mentors into figuring out where their skills are and where they need to go. So as a mid-level, I can release this part of my duty and give it to another individual to help their toolbox or their toolkits and their talents be developed even further. And then just collaborating on various different initiatives, either institutional-wise or across institutions within the state, within national or statewide organizations. Those are the different types of engagement processes. There's always the back line of funding, and that's where you as a supervisor needs to figure out the few dollars that we have for professional development, where is that going to go and who's it going to go to better affect that person or that supervisee to better develop their skills and or the skills of the office or the institution as a whole. We're often met in this kind of like, we're between this rock and a hard place as mid-levels. And it's really important for us to kind of like, what we say is like manage up and understand where our peers are coming from, so that we are these kind of like gateways to make sure that our offices are met with the performance that is needed.
Great. So we brought up this concept of membership. I think, Mamta, you brought it up earlier. And we often serve in this dual role of mentoring and mentees, right? So can you speak to the importance of mentoring, and particularly as a mid-level professional, how do we go about seeking appropriate mentors?
So, you know, we all need different things. So I first think that, for me, reflexivity is really important. And so how we kind of are in a space where we're thinking about, okay, where do I flourish? Where and how do I flourish? Where do I contribute? Where are my at least perceived gaps? And then the last piece is, what am I not aware about that somebody will be honest with me? You know, in a mentor-mentee relationship, somebody will be honest and candid with me about. I say that because it would be really awesome to have, you know, somebody who we're in relationship with that's just going to affirm everything we do. And affirmation is really, really important. I personally believe in having a healthy and candid mentorship relationship, because I just feel like there's growth there, right? And I think that that's what we would want for our students, with our students. And so I would offer, we should student affairs ourselves, is what I would, let's use student affairs as a verb and do that in terms of pursuing a mentorship relationship. The thing that I would say, though, is I think we often, I think about it like asking someone out on a date. Like there's this nervousness of doing that, like, oh, the mentor will say no. I would offer, let that go. I think most people will say yes to a request of mentorship. I would just offer that when you're engaging in strengthening a mentor-mentee relationship, that you become the lead facilitator of that relationship. And oftentimes because you don't know the scope or experiences that your mentor is engaging in, right? So they might be, if they're a peer, they might have a different set of things that they're working on. If they're, you know, a step up or a couple of steps up in terms of their level in the field, their time or capacity or their ability to manage that time and capacity might be different. So I would offer, like with my mentors, I schedule those times. I don't, but what I used to do was be afraid, oh, I'm afraid you won't have time for me, and oh, I know your schedule must be busy. I would let that go and just offer the request, can I schedule a time to meet with you? Can we meet at our conferences? And be clear about your learning agenda from a structural place, and then be open and flexible to the learning agenda that your mentor brings. I think about mentor-mentee relationships almost like yoga lineages, you know, and so think about the lineage that of philosophy or thinking. So when you're kind of thinking about a mentor, what kind of lineage of consciousness do you want for yourself in terms of how you serve students, or how we are as educators? So those are kind of the elements of discernment that I use in that space.
So I know we've got a few senior student affairs professionals watching in on this episode here today. So Maureen, from your research, what can senior level leaders do to influence career satisfaction for the mid-levels?
I would love for more to have really candid conversations about commitment and entrenchment, and if you are entrenched, how can we enhance your satisfaction here? You know, assuming you're a good employee, you know, are there other things that we can get you involved in, whether it's some campus-wide committees or support you for professional association leadership? But really taking a conscientious and a developmental approach to supervision, fostering career identity and planning, resilience. I absolutely echo what Mamta says about being one of those people who will cheer people on, but also give them some honest and sometimes difficult feedback when that's necessary. I think really coaching for professional development. And I think also, big picture, really ensuring that career advancement is neither dependent on moving out of the institution or staying in it. That there's a flexibility and that there really are opportunities across the board. So sometimes really the only possibility for promotion is to move to another institution. And I think doing everything you can to support an employee in that, I think absolutely it's beneficial for our profession to keep those people in the profession versus losing them because there just aren't good opportunities here. So I think that there's a lot of those big picture sorts of things that SSAOs can do to really nurture mid-levels. And I think, you know, to be one of the voices that doesn't promote an idea that there's something the matter with somebody who doesn't aspire to a senior student affairs position.
I think to add on to that would be for SSAOs to understand that as a mid-level, there's more to us as well, in the sense of our hobbies and our home life and giving that personal touch. The candidness is very well, and that's what we look for, but also realizing that holistic view of a professional, whether they're sitting on a community board, how does that help the institution as a large, and can there be time that's given for that? Or if they're in a community choir, or they're in some type of a Habitat for Humanity, or something that gives back in the community as well, that links back to the institution.
So mid-levels are like onions; they have layers, right?
Yeah. Lots of layers.
So you've all alluded to the fact that when it comes down to it, you know, often the senior level folks are setting the vision, but it's the mid-level folks who have to make things happen and manage the change. And it seems like it's getting harder and harder to do because things are moving so fast. It's hard to keep up with the literature and the current events, and our institutions are demanding more and more. What does it mean? This is for anyone. What does it mean to be an effective leader and model of change?
So when I think about leadership and again, modeling, you know, being open to change, so to speak, I think, again, because I believe so strongly in the health and well-being and joy and flourishing of mid-level professionals, it's not that they have to get things done. We are lucky that mid-level professionals advance the mission of our work. That is a gift. And so first, acknowledging the gift of that kind of work, I think, is critical. And for me, like, one of the things that I have to remind myself in this privileged identity is that I need to always be in a space where I'm learning from that wisdom and taking ownership if that my perspective might miss that lived reality that our colleagues at the mid-level might be trying to share, and I might not be listening or may not be as open as I need to. So I think about, mid-level, this is the heartbeat, right? And so if we're not listening and monitoring the heartbeat, that's a duty of care that we have. I also think there's a difference between so when many of us are in this field because we're passionate about what we do. I will assume that, if that's okay. But passion, we associate passion with attachment. So I'm passionate about my work, therefore I'm attached to it, therefore it has to be done a certain way. I would offer, instead of attachment, the notion of detachment, right? So when you're detached from your work, it's not that you're less passionate about it, but that, it's kind of that notion of if you love something, set it free, right? And so how do we approach this with the passion that is so committed that we're able to be detached so that we can be liberated in how we advance the mission? And so leading from a place of liberation rather than containment is guidance that I would offer to anyone across the continuum of how we serve at our institutions. I just think it becomes more critical for mid-level professionals because, again, I feel like the greatest delivery of mission happens at this level, and so how their wisdom is leveraged is critical. And so I would offer the notion of serving in a detached way rather than an attached, kind of contained way.
I think for me, for a model of change is having that drive to do the best that you can, and with the resources that are available to you, and being able to give back to whatever way is needed as a mid-level. Being that effective leader is truly just progressing, understanding who you are and what you're giving back. Everyone's human and mistakes do occur, and so being able to show as a leader how to move forward will then give other people the opportunity to look up to that leader and say, okay, well, this is where they've gone through, or they've been able to handle this situation one way or the other. But having that drive, that passion, I think that's where I feel the most change can occur, either in a person's life or at their institution or in their community, in that way.
Mamta, you were selected to be on the faculty for ACPA's Mid-Level Managers Institute last year, and I think you've re-upped again to help out this year.
Mm-hmm.
Can you describe that experience for our viewers?
Oh my gosh, we don't have enough time for me to describe that experience. So the Mid-Level Managers Institute for ACPA was such a restorative and profound experience for me. And while I was certainly part of the collective as a faculty member, it was just a profound learning community for all of us. I loved how I was challenged. I loved the community that frankly, the participants co-created. Certainly there's a curriculum there, but what I really appreciated about the curriculum is, again, it centered the agency of the participant, right? And so my agency of my experience, and where am I struggling with, where do I have agency around supervision? Where do I have agency around negotiating my relationship with my supervisor? Where do I have agency around this changing landscape or demographics? But at the end of the day, the professional was the center of the conversation, not you need to advance as the center of the conversation, not here's your deficit lens around XYZ functional area topic. It was, we are all learners together, we're in community together. Now, again, for any curriculum like this, there's going to be, curriculum and content related to that, but I feel like the agency of the participants as well as the human experience was upheld. Now, again, I'll take ownership. That was my experience. I honestly say it is probably the most profound educational experience. There's 3 higher ed experiences that I've had, and this is in my top 3 of experiences that I had. I'm so thankful that I had a chance to experience it this past year. Quite honestly, I wish I had done this within the first 5 to 7 years of being in the field. It really would have helped me think about my career differently, and think about not my relationships differently, and how I can lead and serve with authenticity differently. So I am deeply grateful, and I'm deeply grateful for the legacy of this institute because there's a strong legacy of it.
Now we're tweeting out the link to that institute. Where is it located this year?
It is in Dallas, Texas, in January.
Very good. So we're nearing the end of our time here. I want to finish up with one final question for each of you, and ask you to share one action that you hope people will take after watching today's episode. Let's start with you, Nicky.
Thanks, Tony. So one of the things as mid-levels, we have connections throughout the nation, and being able to use those connections to better advance for it. For example, if I can add a shameless plug, tomorrow at 11, we're doing a webinar through a collaboration through Mid-Level Community of Practice and the Pan-African Network about the discussions of what happened this summer of 16 and how do we get faculty, staff, and students in the mindset of getting back to the academia. This just came up when a group of mid-levels just were sitting around and talking about this situation, and we're like, let's put a webinar and get people to talk about this. So use the resources that you have in being able to not only advance your own skills, but the advance of the profession itself. And that can lead to much more collaborations, professional development, and open those doors for those positions that we're looking for or may enhance our own skills.
I just want to mention, in researching for the show, I discovered you actually have a Facebook group for mid-level professionals, right?
Yes, we do have a Facebook group as well, and we have a Twitter account, and it's all ACPA's Mid-Level Community of Practice,
Great.
MLCOP.
Okay. Maureen, let's go to you. What's the one action you hope people will take, other than going back and reading your JCSD article, which
right.
was in July. Hopefully we found the link for it.
Yeah. Obviously. For mid-levels themselves, I really hope that they'll examine some of those concepts that we've talked about today and that we talk about in the article, but then really learn to advocate for themselves and their need and what they need in terms of career contentment and commitment, in or out of the field. In, I hope, but out if you really find out that this isn't your thing. And for supervisors of mid-levels, I really hope that they'll work intentionally with their supervisees to enhance their development and their investment in the field.
Great. Mamta?
Well, I have a lot of gratitude towards mid-level professionals, so certainly I want to invoke that. The piece that I would say is trust your wisdom, right? I mean, I don't need to invoke Dr. Seuss, but there's no one more youer than you, right? And so how does your wisdom contribute to the learning experience of students in a way that nobody else can, right? We are the nexus of generations of wisdom, each one of us. And so we bring something that is unique. And so then how do we situate ourselves within our communities to share and offer that wisdom in a way that uplifts ourselves and each other? So really, I think sometimes we feel like we have to prove ourselves. And I would say take that away and offer trust. Let's trust ourselves and lead from that space of trust and upliftment. And I think that liberates space and consciousness for others to do the same. So to me, that's part of the culture shift, because again, I would offer that I think our mid-level professionals are the carriers and containers of culture. And so when we do that meaningful work on ourselves, it automatically shifts the culture, which then becomes a really profound thing for our students.
Fantastic. Well, thank you, all of you, for sharing such great inspiration, wisdom, and strategies today. Thanks also to our sponsors, Stoner and ACPA, for supporting these dialogues. Heather will be back next month for an episode on September 14th called Unintended Impact, How White People Respond When We Mess Up. Then, a week later, I'll be back on September 21st with a panel of guests to discuss how we can best engage in conversations about controversial topics with our students on campus. Certainly with the rhetoric heating up around the current election, there'll be lots to discuss on how we can have those conversations and dialogues with our students. You can receive reminders about this and other great shows by subscribing to the Higher Ed Live newsletter. You can also browse the archives at higheredlive.com. I'm Tony Doody. Thanks for watching, everyone. I hope you make it a great week, and I look forward to seeing you soon. Take care.